back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and we got a few more Commander 2021 legendary creatures to talk about. You know, let's get those brewing juices flowing and start thinking of some ideas of how we're going to use these guys. First up, Felisa, Fang of Silverquill. 2, a white and a black, 4 mana, Vampire Wizard, 3/2. So it is a vampire. That's interesting. I wonder if we could go in some vampire decks. Has flying and also has Mentor. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, create X tapped 2/1 white and black inkling creature tokens with flying where X is the number of counters it had on it. Wow, that is a very unique ability. So it's got to be non-token creatures first of all, right? Whenever a non-token creature dies, you control, right? So a non-token creature you control dies if it had counters on it. So it doesn't have to be any kind of counter, right? It can be a -1/-1 counter. Right off the top of my head, I'm thinking Black Sun Zenith. You Black Sun Zenith, everyone's board dies. Your creatures had -1/-1 counters on them from the Black Sun Zenith. So now you're going to get 2/1 Inkling creature tokens whenever creature you control. So that's each creature you... Oh boy. So Black's... I think I hit the jackpot here already. So you're getting X tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens where X is the number of counters it had on it. So if you have 5 creatures out and you Black Sun Zenith for 5, that's 5 creatures with 5 counters on them. That's 25 Inkling creature tokens you're going to get, right? Because this triggers for each creature that dies, and you're getting a number of tokens equal to the number of counters on them. So pretty sure, yeah, wow. So definitely all your board wipes are going to be in that regard. I don't know how many there are, though. I can't even think of any. I don't know if there is. But Black Sun Zenith is an absolute auto-include in this deck. Obviously, you can just go to the +1/+1 counter route. You know, there already was a commander, Spoiled the Dean, the flippable Dean, right? The MDFC one that is going to be putting counters on stuff. Also wants your creatures to be dying. So that is going to work in this deck, and this card is going to work in that deck. I imagine they would go in each other's decks for sure. You know, this is broad. It's not obvious what you want to be doing here. I love that. I really love commanders where it's like, okay, I can go a bunch of different ways with this. Obviously, it has Mentor too. So, you know, when it attacks, you put a +1 counter on a target attacking creature with lesser power, right? So you can use Felisa to put +1/+1 counters on your attacking creatures. And this is an auto-include in an Alenda deck, I believe. The fact that it's a vampire is just a bonus. But in an Alenda deck, right, it dies. Again, they changed the dies trigger, so this works now. When your Alenda dies, it's got 8 counters on it, +1/+1 counters. Let's say, for example, it dies, you get all those vampire tokens, and you're going to get 8 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens. So yeah, that's, you know, you don't build this way. You see this card and you're like, hey, that probably goes in my Felice deck. I don't think it does. I don't think this goes in a Felice deck because this cares about counters. It doesn't really care about tokens. You know, whenever a non-token creature you control dies. So I wouldn't put it in a deck like that. This goes in a counters deck. And if you're building a deck with this, just go all over the place. You know, you're putting indestructible counters on stuff, and you're putting death touch counters on stuff. You're putting counters on your creatures that are going to help you anyway. And then when your creatures die, you get the tokens. Next up, Nils Discipline Enforcer. 2 and a white. Legendary creature, human cleric, 2/2. Okay, so it is a cleric. That I would say is significant for sure. At the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature that player controls. For each player, so that's you and your opponents, obviously, right? And it's up to, so you don't have to do it. You can pick and choose who you want. So already this, you know, you can go a political route with this, I think, but there's more. Each creature with 1 or more counters on it can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless its controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's political for sure. I mean, first of all, the number of counters on that creature, that can be any creature. So again, Alenda, if we're using Alenda as the example, your opponent has an Alenda deck. That Alenda isn't going to be able to attack you unless they pay X for each counter on it. Doesn't have to be the counters you put on it, just any counters at all, right? Also, I wish this wasn't in mono white. I could think of a zillion ways to use this because you don't have to put +1/+1 counters on your opponent's creatures either. Again, you can put lifelink counters or death touch counters, any kind of counter, and then they have to pay X for the number of counters on that creature. And man, I'm already starting to think, hello, Magnetic Web. Magnetic Web strikes again, right? Put a magnet counter on that creature. Yes, that goes in this deck. For sure. That's actually an all-star in this deck, right? Because it also inhibits attacking and stuff like that. So that definitely goes in the deck, right? And you can put +1/+1 counters on your creatures too. So you're definitely going to go with that route. I gotta say, for all the complaining about white, about Boros, they absolutely killed it with Boros in Strixhaven. And white is absolutely killing it too, I think. This is probably the third mono-white commander that I would really, really like to do a build around with, and possibly a deck. You know, I don't like doing more than one in each color, but I might have to. This is such an interesting build around. I mean, it's counters, right? This is why Atraxa is so popular, because Proliferate is any kind of counter. So there's so many different ways you can build an Atraxa deck. Atraxa is powerful, but also versatile. You can go a lot of different ways with it, right? You can do poison, +1/+1 counters. You can do a lot of different things with it. Counters is just ubiquitous. There's so many different cards that use it. So I'm already interested to do a little bit of searching and finding out what cards would work really neat with this deck. Very interesting build. And lastly today, Fane the Broker. 2 and a black, human Warlock. Man, there's a lot of Warlocks in this set. It's a 3/3. Sacrifice a creature, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. So already this goes in the Felisa deck, obviously, right? Because you're going to sacrifice an Inkling token to put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature that when it dies, you get another Inkling token. So rinse and repeat, right? And obviously, like, without even reading the rest of this card, already this fits in so many Aristocrats decks. It looks pretty good in my Nadir and Miara deck also. But let's continue. You tap, remove a counter from creature you control, create a treasure token. Okay. Now we're going a bit of a different direction here, though. Tap. This is 3 tap abilities. How many cards out there have... I know there's artifacts, but how many creatures out there have 3 tap abilities? There can't be that many. Tap. Sacrifice an artifact. Okay, now we're sacrificing artifacts. Wow. Create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. All right. And you can pay for it to untap Fane the Broker. So, obviously... right away, people are going to go, oh, if you have infinite mana, you can just yeah, okay. The fact that you can pay for untap them to reuse another ability, right? So you can remove a counter from a creature you control to create a treasure token, then pay for untap them, sacrifice the treasure token to create a 2/1 Inkling token, and then, you know, you go back around to the start and sacrifice a creature. Very similar to Trading Post, where you put the tokens on a creature, then you remove the tokens to create a treasure token, then you sacrifice the treasure token, right? Trading Post does the same thing, where you can sort of move up and down all of the abilities. The fact that you can untap him just makes it so that he is more usable. If you had to wait a whole nother turn, obviously 1,000-Year Elixir. I mean, I don't know how many times I mentioned that card on this channel, but that 100% goes in this deck. Definitely an interesting... I mean, this goes in so many decks. I'm not even going to start mentioning the amount of decks that this goes in. Any deck that wants to be sacrificing creatures, any deck that is sacrificing artifacts, any deck that has counters on their creatures. There's just so many decks that this goes in. But as a build around, I really think that, you know, there's a lot of ways, again, that you could go with this. You could have artifacts and creatures that you could be sacrificing. You could concentrate more on the remove counters ability, but I think probably your best bet is to do sort of a artifact and creature / you know, aristocrat style with both. Really, again, very versatile, so that for that reason you can go a lot of directions with this. But yeah, that is it for today. 3 more really interesting, really exciting commanders that, gosh, there's just so many. I don't know which ones I'm going to choose for myself. You guys are probably already thinking which ones you're falling in love with, but don't be too hasty, because there's still more to come. So you might want to replace the one you've already chosen with a new one. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.